I take what CIRA does and makes it consumable for the public, and makes pretty animations and just cool things to look at. Whether that's just on Twitter or if that ends up on like the nightly news when we have a big hurricane or something going on.
Can you start by explaining, for those who don't know, like what satellite imagery is and kind of the history there as far as the different types and what we use it for?
Yeah, so there are all types of satellite imagery coming from all sorts of satellites. The satellites I mainly work with are the geostationary satellites. So we have a new GOES-R suite of satellites that are the current generation, and at the time it was like the up and coming thing. Now it's sort of a commonplace that meteorologists look at this imagery and just oogle and ogle over. Um, and and so yeah, that I feel like satellite imagery sort of entered at like a new era when those satellites went up, when GOES 16 went up, because we had access to 1 minute imagery for two different locations at all times. And in previous satellite suites, we had that type of imagery, but it was very rare where we could get that. It was sort of like a different mode on the satellite you had to activate to turn on that type of imagery. So I think that was a huge boon to satellite imagery, especially in like earth sciences and weather. And then we have all sorts of new products now that can tell us a lot more about weather. Particularly the geostationary lightning mapper. That was a huge new addition to looking at weather. And we also now have a product called fire temperature, which can help meteorologists see where fires are starting and sort of how they're evolving. And that's been a huge boon to satellite imagery and to looking at weather events. We do have polar orbiting satellites, which are hugely important. It's JPSS is the sort of the polar orbiting side of to GOES, and I work a little bit with that imagery, and CIRA works a lot with that imagery. But I'm more so on the geostationary stuff is just sort of what I got used to, and I think what meteorologists sort of are drawn to as well.
So when we go to the CIRA website and we see kind of these events, what's currently happening right now, and then some cool images, but always kind of different. Are you creating those, and what does the initial product look like that you are working with? And then what's the process to get to what we see as the general public on the website?
So the answer is yes, I am making those animations. For a long time, it was just me, but we now have a team that puts together these animations, which is wonderful. It's really nice to have a group of people to work with. And so sometimes I'm taking data and making my own imagery, and that's a little bit of a longer process. Looking at, it's not the raw data from GOES, but it's not the imagery. You have to sort of create the imagery. But then other times I'm just going to our web app Slider, which is publicly accessible, and downloading from there. And then I do some things in processing, like in Adobe, to make them have zooms or have movement or blend two products together a little bit differently. So sometimes I'm doing a lot to the imagery. Other times I'm just sort of putting a little bow on it and making it just a little bit nicer to look at.
What's some of the really cool things you've seen recently?
Hurricane Lee and Franklin. I think Franklin was probably more impressive to look at. The eye in particular just got a little bit clearer for longer. So that that was fascinating to look at. It also was a fairly low impact storm. It did cause some surf and riptide along the East Coast, but it didn't make a direct landfall or anything. I think it did bring impacts to Bermuda. So it's always nice when you have low impact storms that you can look at. So something that is always cool and never hurts anybody are von Karman vortices. Those are probably like my favorite thing to look at in satellite imagery. They are these they're called von Karman vortex streets because they usually form in these giant rows, and they often form off of islands, just sort of standalone islands in oceans. And they basically form when air goes around an island and it comes back on the other side of it, and then these vortices feed off of each other, and it creates sort of like this feedback loop on them. and they're just amazing to look at. So if anyone in the audience, has never seen these, just Google that, and you'll spend like an hour looking at these animations, and it's still imagery. And there was actually a really cool one last week on Guadalupe Island, which is, in my opinion, the Von Karman vortex capital of the world, because they are there like something, I don't know. I feel like it's maybe like 10 days out of a month you can see them there. So it's maybe like a third of the time they have them there. So they're really cool.
Satellite imagery is used in so many other ways beyond just weather. So can you give me some examples of stuff you've seen that is not weather related?
Recently we had the Kilauea volcano eruption, and our fire temperature imagery can see the lava essentially, and it illuminates these hot spots. So, not technically weather, we're still earth sciences, but that's really cool when you see a volcanic eruption and you can see like the hot spot that the lava produces. Okay, the weirdest thing to me on satellite imagery that you can see, I see like fairly regularly over open waters, are called actinoform clouds. So this is still weather, but it's not really like weather that impacts anyone. And they form in these clusters of stratocumulus, marine stratocumulus, and they form in groups too, and they take on they have this like little circulation. I think they're like, there's not a lot of research that goes into these because they're low impact, but I believe they are little mini low pressure systems. They sort of form their own tiny low pressure circulation, and they end up looking like these tentacles that are swirling around this eye. And I know it's hard to like imagine when I'm describing it. So yeah, hopefully there's some imagery here showing you. And they're just the weirdest things I've ever seen. I remember the first time I found them, I didn't know what they were. And I just like, without looking anything up, I just posted it to Twitter. And people were like, what am I looking at? Because they looked otherworldly. It was weird looking at a cloud and never hearing about it. Because, you learn about so much in school, and just like, I feel like weather for a lot of people is also a hobby, and you learn about a lot of stuff just looking up stuff and just learning about stuff. And the thing is, we've known about these clouds for a long time. I forget which satellite, but it was a really early on satellite where we had these like super fuzzy, like black and white, low res pictures of these actinoform clouds. I'll try to dig up the image for you to show, because I can't remember which satellite it is, but one of my colleagues saw my tweet and was like, oh yeah, these are actinoform clouds, and here's this picture that we got like 40, 50 years ago of them. And
Wow.
I think I don't know, I see them a lot more now, and I don't know if just because I'm aware of it, but I see them a lot more like on Twitter, like people finding them and posting them. So one of the coolest, weirdest things I've ever seen on satellite imagery.
What about man-made events that you pick up on satellite imagery? I posted something the other day about September 11th and showing Hurricane Erin off the coast, like just a few hundred miles off the coast of New York. And that was in 2001. And we were able to see also in that imagery, the smoke from Manhattan. And so I'm curious what you've seen as far as man-made events on satellite imagery.
I think probably the most common thing we see man-made are like explosions or like smoke plumes from explosions or like fires. The really like high res imagery is better at looking at man-made things. Like it's usually polar orbiting or like CubeSat satellites that can see like, I don't even know the resolution, but really fine resolution where you can see things like the developing over time, like neighborhoods or like deforestation over time. The geostationary satellites aren't as good at that just because they're not that super res imagery. We put them up in space to look at weather. Essentially, that's their sole purpose. Man-made wise, it's usually like fires or like smoke plumes from like explosions or something like that you can see. But that picture you brought up of on September 11th, it's such a haunting, eerie satellite animation, and I think like all meteorologists can sort of picture it when you're talking about it, and something you'll never forget. Yeah.
So tell me about the CIRA library and what's there and what's accessible to the general public, because this is all free and just there. And I think somebody could really dive in, just spend all day looking at this stuff.
Sure. Yeah. So the Cirrus Satellite Library is the goal is for it to be a comprehensive library of weather events, and that's through the lens of satellite imagery. So it's a bunch of animations of weather events. Usually they're high impact weather events, but sometimes we'll put like right now I think we have Nigel up on there, which is won't be likely not a high impact weather event, but we still want to put it in catalog it. Um, and it's something that's really growing right now. It's only been around for a year, so one of our big goals is backlogging it with historical events. And I've started to do this slowly. We have Hurricane Andrew, we have Hurricane Harvey, some of these big hurricanes. But that's like a huge task. That's going to take many, many years to actually make it comprehensive and something that spans our satellite era that we've been in. And we also have more than hurricanes. I know I'm talking about hurricanes a lot, but we have fires, we have severe storms, we have volcanic eruptions. We had Storm Daniel, which happened a couple weeks ago, maybe like a week and a half ago, which was a metacane. And then we also have like interesting things too that aren't necessarily events, like the von Karman vortices, actiniform clouds, things that sort of get at our nerd side. That it's like, oh well, science is cool, weather is cool, the atmosphere is cool. And yeah, we update that almost every day. Like even on weekends, sometimes we'll put up an animation if there's something going on. And we have a daily loop, which is the thing that we think is the coolest or most noteworthy thing of the day. And that's always a cool way. If you don't want to like scroll through the entire library, it's always a cool way to look at the thing that we picked out for the day. And yeah, and I can send you a link too, so that folks can look at the link. But you can also just Google Cirrus Satellite Library, and you should find it.
Is the hope to educate people, to bring awe-inspiring weather to people, or is this mainly to serve kind of the scientific or media community? What are you hoping to achieve with these cool animations?
So I think it's both. I think the very bare bones goal was I'm making these animations every day for Twitter, or if I get a request, I'm sending it to them. I want this imagery, this sort of polished imagery to be available to everyone, and just put it out there so people can download it and look at it as they want to use it. We certainly do have folks in the media and other meteorologists, some of our other colleagues in mind when making these, so that hey, you can show this landfall right when it happened. We try to be timely about it too, so that folks in the news can, it's not old news when we post it. One of our big goals moving forward is making an educational side to the satellite library, which will be more for just general public or people interested wanting to learn more about satellite imagery. And we're hoping to like describe phenomena, describe satellite products, and educate on those things too. So yeah, it's I feel like it's like a little toddler right now that we're sort of taking care of and trying to make it into a full grown satellite library. So
hey, thank you so much for watching. While you're here, check out some other videos you just may like.